Here is a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if the problem is not your circumstances? What if it is not your schedule, your resources, your environment, or the people around you? What if the only thing standing between you and the life you want is the version of you that keeps choosing comfort over action every single day without even realizing it? That is not an accusation. That is psychology. And once you understand what is actually happening inside your brain, everything changes. Psychologists call it the intention-behavior gap. It is the space between knowing what you need to do and actually doing it. Research from the University of Zurich found that people routinely overestimate their ability to act on their intentions, not because they are dishonest, but because the human brain is wired in a way that consistently prioritizes the present over the future. You are not weak. You are neurologically human, but that does not mean you have to stay stuck. Let us walk through exactly what is happening and, more importantly, what to do about it. Picture your average day. You wake up with a clear sense of what matters. You know the project you need to work on. You know the goal you have been chasing for months. You know the action that would move your life forward. And for a brief moment, lying there before you pick up your phone, you genuinely intend to do it. Then the morning happens. You check your messages. You scroll through one feed, then another. You tell yourself it is just a few minutes of warming up, a little mental ease before the real work begins. But the few minutes stretch. The morning stretches. And then it is noon, and the guilt quietly settles in, and you tell yourself that the afternoon is when you will really get started. The afternoon comes. The energy is lower. The motivation has cooled. You reason that starting something serious at this point in the day makes little sense, and that tomorrow, with fresh energy and a clearer mind, everything will come together. Tomorrow arrives and the cycle begins again. This is not a personal failure. This is a pattern, and patterns have origins. In 1999, psychologist Roy Baumeister conducted a landmark study on what he called ego depletion, the idea that self-control and decision-making draw from a limited mental resource. Every time you resist a temptation, make a choice, or navigate uncertainty, you are spending from that resource. By the time the afternoon comes around, after a morning of small decisions, digital inputs, and low-level resistance, your capacity for disciplined action is genuinely depleted. This is why so many people are motivated at night, lying in bed making plans, but struggle to act in the morning once the day begins its demands. Your planning brain and your doing brain are not the same system. Understanding this changes how you approach your day. But there is something deeper going on, something more fundamental than energy or decision fatigue. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's research on the prefrontal cortex showed that the brain evaluates potential actions through an emotional lens before the rational mind even processes them. When you think about sitting down to do difficult, uncertain, goal-directed work, your brain does not just calculate whether it is the right thing to do. It also checks in with your emotional system, and if that work carries associations with past failure, self-doubt, or fear of judgment, the emotional brain quietly signals danger. And when your brain senses danger, it steers you away from it. Not dramatically, not through a conscious decision. It just makes the phone feel more appealing. It makes the idea of making coffee first feel more necessary. It makes starting tomorrow feel entirely reasonable. This is the avoidance loop in action. It is not laziness. It is the brain doing exactly what it evolved to do, protect you from perceived threat. The problem is that the threat your brain is protecting you from is not a predator. It is your own potential. Here is where perfectionism enters the picture. And this part is important because most people misunderstand what perfectionism actually is. Perfectionism is not high standards. Dr. Brené Brown, research professor at the University of Houston and author of multiple best-selling books on vulnerability and shame, describes perfectionism as a self-protective thought pattern. It is, in her words, a 20-ton shield that we carry around thinking it will protect us, when in reality it is the thing that is keeping us from being seen. When you wait for the perfect plan, the perfect moment, the perfect level of readiness before you begin, you are not being rigorous. You are being afraid, because the perfect plan never arrives. And the real purpose of waiting for it is to avoid the discomfort of imperfect action, which always involves the risk of imperfect results. Psychologist Carol Dweck of Stanford University has spent decades studying what separates people who grow from people who stagnate. Her research on mindset showed clearly that individuals who see effort and failure as part of the learning process are far more likely to persist, improve, and eventually succeed than those who believe their worth is tied to their performance. The perfectionist is someone who has quietly decided that trying and failing is worse than not trying at all. But what they have actually decided without realizing it is that protecting their self-image is more important than building the life they want. And underneath all of this, underneath the avoidance and the perfectionism and the procrastination, there is something most motivational content never addresses honestly. Fear, not the dramatic kind, the quiet, persistent kind. The fear that if you actually try, really try, with full commitment and visible effort, and it still does not work out, then you will have no excuse left. The fantasy will be over, and you will have to face the possibility that maybe the life you imagined is harder to reach than you thought. So you stay in the in-between. You keep the dream alive by never testing it. You protect the idea of yourself as someone who could achieve great things by never fully attempting great things. Psychologist Adam Grant, organizational psychologist at the Wharton School and author of the book Originals, calls this the procrastination paradox. In his research on creativity and originality, he found that moderate procrastinators, people who delay but not indefinitely, actually produce more creative outcomes than people who either rush in immediately or wait until the last moment. But that same pattern becomes destructive when the delay is indefinite, when you use thinking and planning as a permanent substitute for action. The line between creative incubation and paralysis is crossed when your internal experience stops feeling like preparation and starts feeling like avoidance. You know which one you are in. So what do you actually do about this? The first shift is not behavioral. It is cognitive. You have to stop expecting motivation to arrive before you act. Motivation is a byproduct of action, not a prerequisite for it. This is one of the most important and most consistently misunderstood truths in behavioral psychology. Research by Teresa Amabile at Harvard Business School, who spent years studying the inner work lives of professionals, found that the single greatest driver of motivation on any given day was making meaningful progress. Not getting inspired, not feeling ready. Progress. You do not wait to feel motivated and then act. You act no matter how small the action, and the motivation follows. This is why the advice to start before you are ready is not just a motivational slogan. It is grounded in neuroscience. When you take action, even micro-level action, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine. That dopamine creates a sense of forward momentum. That momentum reduces the perceived threat of the work, and that reduced threat makes continued action easier. The entire engine of consistent behavior starts with one small, low-stakes movement in the right direction. The second shift is environmental, and this is often the most underestimated lever people have. Dr. B.J. Fogg, behavior scientist at Stanford University and founder of the Behavior Design Lab, has spent over 2 decades studying how human behavior is shaped by the environment, not just by willpower. His research makes one thing very clear. The easiest way to change your behavior is to change the context in which the behavior occurs. Willpower is not a personality trait. It is a situational resource. And the people who appear to have the most willpower are often simply the people who have designed their environment so that willpower is rarely required. If your phone is next to you, you will check it. Not because you lack discipline, but because the trigger is always present. If your workspace is cluttered with competing visual demands, your attention will fragment. If the path to distraction is effortless and the path to focused work requires multiple intentional steps, you will default to distraction every time. This is not a character flaw. It is a design flaw, and design flaws can be fixed. Put the phone in a different room. Close every tab that is not relevant to your current task. Create a specific time block for your most important work and treat it with the same seriousness you give a meeting with someone else. The more friction you add to distraction, and the more you reduce friction toward your goals, the less you have to rely on motivational energy that comes and goes. The third shift involves how you relate to your own inconsistency. And this is the one that most people skip, which is why they eventually quit. You are going to have bad days. You are going to skip sessions, break streaks, lose momentum, and fall back into familiar patterns. That is not failure. That is being human. The question is not whether you will stumble. The question is how you respond when you do. Dr. Kristin Neff, psychologist at the University of Texas at Austin and one of the leading researchers on self-compassion, has published extensive research showing that people who treat themselves with kindness after a setback recover faster, learn more, and perform better over time than people who rely on self-criticism as motivation. Self-criticism feels productive. It feels like accountability. But the research is consistent. Harsh self-judgment activates the same threat response in the brain as external criticism. It triggers cortisol, the stress hormone, narrows your thinking, and reduces your capacity for creative problem solving and long-term planning. It makes the next action harder, not easier. Self-compassion, by contrast, activates the care system in the brain. It creates psychological safety. And psychological safety is what allows you to take risks, try again, and stay in the process long enough to improve. Forgiving yourself for a bad day is not letting yourself off the hook. It is what gives you the mental and emotional capacity to show up again tomorrow. Now let us talk about the long game, because this is where almost everyone gets it wrong. You are not trying to transform your life in a week. You are not trying to become a different person overnight. You are trying to shift the identity you hold of yourself, one small piece of evidence at a time. James Clear, in his widely studied framework on habit formation, describes this as identity-based change. Most people try to change their outcomes first. They set a goal and try to achieve it through willpower. But the most durable change comes from shifting the story you tell yourself about who you are. Every time you sit down and do the work, even for 15 minutes, even when the output is rough and imperfect and nothing like the vision you had in your head, you are casting a vote for a new identity. You are telling your brain, this is who I am now. I am someone who does the work. And the brain, which is constantly updating its model of who you are based on your behavior, begins to adjust. The resistance gets quieter, not gone, quieter. The friction of starting decreases, not to zero, just enough. And the gap between who you are and who you want to be begins slowly to close. One more thing, and this is important. Stop consuming this kind of content as a substitute for action. There is an entire industry built around the feeling of self-improvement. Motivational videos, productivity podcasts, books about discipline, and all of it feels valuable. It creates a warm, forward-moving sensation that your brain interprets as progress. But psychologists call this phenomenon moral licensing. When you feel like you have already done something good, your brain gives you permission to coast. Watching a video about working harder can actually reduce how hard you work that day because your brain has already received the emotional payoff of self-improvement without the cost of the actual effort. The information is not the problem. You already have enough information. What you need is fewer inputs and more outputs. Less learning about action and more practicing it. So here is the invitation. not a challenge, not a demand, an invitation. When this ends, close it. Do not open another video. Do not scroll to the comments. Choose one thing, one small, specific, clearly defined thing that moves you toward what matters to you. Not the whole project, not the entire plan. One step, small enough that it would be almost embarrassing to say you could not do it. And do that one thing. Then do it again tomorrow. Then the day after that. Not because motivation has arrived. Not because the conditions are ideal. Not because you feel ready or confident or certain that it will work. But because the life you want to live is not built in grand moments of inspiration. It is built in small moments of ordinary decision, accumulated over time, until the distance between who you were and who you have become is almost impossible to measure. You already know what to do. The only question that remains is whether today is the day you decide that knowing is no longer enough.